Every second you panic, your mind shrinks. Every moment you react without control, your potential drains away. Today, you will learn the exact mental habits that allow you to stay calm when chaos surrounds you. You will discover how to train your mind to act with clarity, not fear. By the end of this audiobook, stress will no longer control you. You will control stress, and you will do it intentionally, systematically, relentlessly. Chapter 1. Stop reacting, start responding. Most people live in reaction. Most people let events dictate their state. You do not have to. You have a choice. You can decide how you respond. That is the foundation of control. That is the foundation of calm. You do not change your circumstances by reacting. You change your life by choosing your response. You have a choice. That's the key. First, recognize your automatic reactions. Observe them without judgment. Notice how your body tightens. Notice how your thoughts race. Panic is often a physical signal before it becomes a mental pattern. Your hands may clench. Your heart may accelerate. Your mind may cycle through worst-case scenarios. That is normal. That is biology. That is not failure. It is a signal. Pay attention. That is the first rule. Awareness precedes control. Most people ignore this. Most people act first and think later. They respond to every stimulus. Emails, messages, interruptions, criticism. They react without pause. You cannot remain calm if you're always reacting. Reacting is surrender. Reacting is surrendering your mind to external forces. Responding is taking control. You have a choice. That's the key. Responding begins with a pause. A micro pause. 1 breath, 2 breaths, even 3. Do not underestimate this. A pause interrupts the automatic loop. It stops the chemical cascade of stress. It gives you space to decide. Pause deliberately. Make it a system. Make it habitual. Every time your body signals panic, pause. That is the rule. That is the structure. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. Repetition matters more than intensity. You do not build calm by waiting for a crisis. You build calm by practicing response daily. Practice micro pauses during small disruptions. When someone cuts you off in traffic, pause. When an email angers you, pause. When a colleague challenges you, pause. These are the exercises. These are the drills. Do not skip them. Repetition beats intensity every time. That is the law. That is the discipline. Awareness and pause alone are not enough. You must decide before action. Decide how you will act, not what you feel. Your feelings will fluctuate. Fear will appear. Frustration will rise. Anger will surface. That is normal. That is expected. Do not let it dictate your behavior. Decide first. Respond strategically. That is the system. That is the habit. That is how control is built. Look at high-pressure leaders and athletes. Study them. A surgeon in the operating room does not panic when complications arise. An elite athlete does not collapse under the pressure of a championship. They respond. They pause. They focus. They have a system. You can adopt the same principles. You do not need permission. You do not need extraordinary circumstances. You only need discipline. You have a choice. That's the key. Let us break this into rules. Rule 1. Observe without judgment. Notice your physical and mental reactions. Record them. Reflect on them. Awareness is the trigger for control. Without it, you remain reactive. Rule 2. Implement the micropause. 1 deep breath. 2 deep breaths. A deliberate pause between stimulus and action. Make it automatic. Repetition makes it unbreakable. Rule 3. Decide before you act. Map the response before the emotion dictates it. Ask yourself, what is the most effective action right now? Focus on function, not feeling. That is discipline. That is strategy. Rule 4. Repeat daily. Integrate this into every interaction. Small tests, small disruptions, minor challenges. Each repetition builds resilience. Each repetition strengthens control. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. Understand this. Reacting is cheap. Reacting is automatic. Anyone can react. Responding is intentional. Responding is deliberate. Responding is strategic. It requires discipline. It requires structure. It requires repeated practice. It is not optional if you want control over stress. You have a choice. That is the key. You will fail at first. You will notice your mind racing despite your best intentions. That is expected. That is feedback. That is data. Treat it as such. Do not judge yourself. Adjust. Reset. Continue. This is the iterative process of mastery. Stress is a teacher. The pause is the classroom. The response is the exam. Discipline is your grade. You have a choice. You don't need their permission. Practice these exercises now. Identify one daily situation where you usually react. Prepare a pause. Decide a strategic response. Execute. Reflect. Repeat. 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 That is how habits are built. That is how control is claimed. Remember, it is not about eliminating stress. It is not about feeling calm. That is a flaw in thinking. Calm is a byproduct. Calm is the result of disciplined response. It's not about avoiding chaos. It's about mastering your response to it. The law is simple. Awareness, pause, decide, respond, repeat. That is the chain. That is the system. That is your foundation. By the end of this chapter, you will recognize that every reaction is a choice you failed to make. Every reaction is a system you can redesign. Every moment of panic is a signal. The signal is not weakness. The signal is opportunity. You have a choice. That is the key. You don't need permission. You don't need perfection. You only need practice. You only need discipline. Prepare yourself. The next chapter will build on this foundation. You will learn how stress silently drains your performance. You will learn how to see the hidden cost of every reactive moment. You will understand why micro-pauses alone are not enough without structural adjustments to your daily habits. Awareness is the first step. The next step is mastery over the systems that sustain calm. That is where we go next. That is where you move from responding to controlling. That is where you begin to transform stress into performance. You have a choice. That is the key. You don't need permission. The next chapter is waiting. Step forward. Take control. Respond deliberately. Chapter 2. The hidden cost of chaos. Chaos is not loud. Chaos does not announce itself. Chaos is silent. It creeps in unnoticed. It accumulates in small increments. By the time you realize it, it has already undermined your performance. That is the hidden cost. You have a choice. That's the key. Stress is the vehicle of chaos. It may appear as tension. It may appear as anxiety. It may appear as frustration. Chronic stress wears the mind down over time. Focus diminishes. Memory falters. Decisions weaken. You may think you are functioning, but performance is slowly eroded. This is not theory. It is biology. It is a fact. You cannot argue with it. You cannot ignore it. You must address it. You have a choice. The first principle is understanding accumulation. Stress does not strike once and leave. It arrives in microdoses. A tense email, a delayed response, a rude comment. Each instance triggers a reaction. Each reaction triggers a micro-stress event. You may feel nothing in the moment. You may feel irritation or impatience. That is normal. That is feedback. That is the system warning you. If repeated, these micro-events compound into a chronic state of dysfunction. That is the hidden cost of chaos. You have a choice. That's the key. Consider this. Most people fail to see the pattern. They respond reactively to each small disruption. They sigh. They mutter. They check their phone. They complain. Each act reinforces instability. Each act trains the mind to be reactive rather than strategic. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. That is the law. That is the system. Every small failure to respond deliberately becomes a habit. Every habit creates structure or disorder. Chaos steals clarity. Clarity creates control. Repeat this. Internalize it. Live it. Habits are the link between stress and performance. They're the architecture of your mental state. Microreactions are the building blocks. Ignored, they form weak structures. Panic becomes automatic. Anxiety becomes default. Focus erodes. Decision-making collapses. Calm is replaced by instinct. Instinct is reactive. Reactive is chaos. That is the cost. You have a choice. That's the key. The second principle is reflection. You must trace the source of daily stress. Identify triggers. Map responses. Track microreactions. Record patterns. Without measurement, you cannot correct. Without correction, chaos continues. This is structural adjustment. This is disciplined observation. You don't need permission. You don't need validation. You only need practice. The third principle is interruption. Stop microreactions before they escalate. Pause before speaking. Pause before acting. Pause before deciding. Create a built-in system of micro-pauses. Insert rules. 1 deep breath, 1 deliberate thought, 1 strategic action. Repeat daily. Repeat in small disruptions. Repeat in major pressure. That is how chaos is neutralized. That is how clarity is preserved. Chaos steals clarity. Clarity creates control. You have a choice. That's the key. Observe real-world examples. A manager in a high-volume environment does not collapse under client complaints. A surgeon in a long procedure does not succumb to irritation from assistants. A pilot navigating turbulence does not panic from sudden alerts. Each of them has a system. Each of them has rules. Each of them repeats disciplined habits. None of them rely on luck. None of them rely on emotion. None of them react unconsciously. That is mastery. That is control. You have a choice. You don't need permission. That's the key. Repetition is essential. Track triggers. Pause deliberately. Respond strategically. Reinforce these behaviors until they are automatic. The mind will default to calm if repeatedly trained. The mind will default to chaos if repeatedly ignored. This is not negotiable. This is law. Microreactions become habits. Habits become systems. Systems determine results. Chaos steals clarity. Clarity creates control. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Internalize. Discipline yourself daily. That is the path. Do not confuse activity with progress. Responding without structure is still reactive. Being busy under stress is still chaos. Focus is not optional. Clarity is not optional. Calm is not optional. They are structural necessities. Treat them as rules, not goals. Build habits that enforce calm. Build routines that enforce strategic responses. Build systems that convert stress into performance. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. That is the law. That is the system. That is control. Finally, integrate reflection, pause, and strategic response. Review your day. Note every trigger. Note every reaction. Evaluate effectiveness. Adjust your system. Repeat tomorrow. Repeat the next day. Repeat the day after. That is the cycle. That is the drill. That is the training. You have a choice. That's the key. The cost of chaos is not external. It is internal. It is mental. It is structural. Ignore it, and it erodes focus, clarity, and performance. Address it, and you reclaim control deliberately and consistently. You don't need permission to control your mind. You don't need external validation. You only need repeated practice. You only need discipline. Chaos steals clarity. Clarity creates control. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Internalize. That is the rule. That is the habit. That is your foundation. Prepare yourself. The next chapter will teach you how to build mental armor daily. You will learn how to structure habits that neutralize stress before it accumulates. You will learn how deliberate routines create resilience. Awareness is necessary. Awareness alone is insufficient. The next step is systematic reinforcement. That is where mastery begins. That is where control becomes permanent. That is where calm becomes default. Step forward. Build the system. Claim clarity. Respond deliberately. Chapter 3. Build mental armor daily. Calm is not spontaneous. Calm is not inherited. Calm is constructed. It is built piece by piece, habit by habit, day by day. That construction is mental armor. You have a choice. That's the key. You can armor your mind, or you can remain exposed. The cost of exposure is chaos. The cost of exposure is reaction. The cost of exposure is lost clarity. Mental armor protects. Mental armor preserves focus. Mental armor allows you to respond strategically. The first step is definition. Mental resilience is not emotion. Mental resilience is not optimism. Mental resilience is a capacity. It is a trained capacity to endure pressure without surrender. It is a trained capacity to maintain clarity in disruption. It is a trained capacity to act deliberately when others panic. That is the system. That is the skill. That is the discipline. You have a choice. That's the key. Resilience is built daily. It is not built in moments of crisis. Crisis reveals resilience. Crisis does not create it. You cannot rely on emergency situations to train your mind. You must train it intentionally. Every day, consistently, without exception. Small habits repeated are the foundation of mental armor. Repetition beats intensity every time. That is the rule. That is the law. That is the structure. Start with breathing. The system is simple. Inhale deliberately. Hold for 1 count. Exhale fully. Repeat. Do this in moments of calm. Do this in moments of stress. Make it a habit. Make it automatic. Breathing regulates the body. It regulates the mind. It interrupts automatic reactions. It inserts space. It inserts control. You don't need permission. You have a choice. That's the key. Next, implement mindfulness check-ins. Observe your mental state without judgment. Scan your body. Scan your thoughts. Identify tension. Identify stress. Label it. Don't fight it. Don't ignore it. Acknowledge it. That is the habit. That is the structure. That is the system. Micro-awareness interrupts escalation. Micro-awareness builds control. Micro-awareness strengthens mental armor. Repeat daily. Repeat consistently. That is the drill. That is the discipline. Add journaling. Document stress triggers. Document reactions. Document patterns. Reflection without action is useless. Reflection with structure builds insight. Insight allows intervention. Intervention allows mastery. Build a small, repeatable journaling habit. 1 entry per day. 3 lines. 5 lines. Be consistent. Repetition beats intensity every time. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. That is the principle. That is the law. That is the foundation. Observe high performers. Soldiers in combat zones conduct daily mental drills. Surgeons review procedures before every operation. CEOs maintain morning routines to prepare for the day. These are not coincidences. These are systems. These are repeated habits. These are deliberate structures. They are examples of mental armor in action. You have a choice. That's the key. You can adopt their systems. You can practice deliberately. You can repeat. You can build armor. Mental armor is cumulative. One habit alone does not suffice. One practice alone is insufficient. Breath alone does not guarantee calm. Mindfulness alone does not guarantee clarity. Journaling alone does not guarantee focus. Combined, repeated, and systematized, these habits reinforce each other. One feeds the other. One stabilizes the other. That is the design. That is the structure. That is the discipline. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Internalize, build, strengthen, protect. You must act deliberately. Insert small drills throughout your day. Pause for 3 breaths before responding to an email. Scan your body for tension before meetings. Reflect briefly after each stressor. These are the microsystems. These are the drills. These are the repeated practices that build resilience. Consistency is non-negotiable. Discipline is non-negotiable. You don't need permission. You have a choice. That's the key. Understand this. Mental armor is invisible. Others cannot see it. Others will not recognize it. That is irrelevant. Its effect is undeniable. Calm under pressure. Clear thinking under chaos. Strategic responses in disruption. These outcomes are measurable. These outcomes are undeniable. Build armor for results, not recognition. Repeat habits for strength, not applause. Repetition is the engine. Discipline is the fuel. You have a choice. That's the key. This system is iterative. Adjust as necessary. Increase the challenge. Increase the practice. Extend the breath hold. Extend the mindfulness duration. Deepen reflection. Strengthen attention. Repetition is the core. Small, repeated adjustments compound over time. Micro-discipline accumulates into macro-resilience. That is the law. That is the structure. That is the system. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. That is the principle. That is the mantra. That is the truth. By the end of this chapter, you will understand that resilience is not optional. Calm is not optional. Focus is not optional. They are structural necessities. They are systems. They are habits. They are repeated behaviors that defend your mind. Mental armor is built through daily practice, through deliberate repetition, and through structured intervention. That is the path. That is the drill. That is the discipline. You have a choice. That's the key. You don't need permission. You only need consistency. You only need structure. You only need repetition. Prepare yourself. The next chapter will teach you how to silence the noise around you. You will learn how to remove external distractions, how to reduce mental clutter, and how to create space for deliberate, strategic thought. Awareness and habits are necessary, but clarity requires silence. That is where focus deepens. That is where calm becomes unshakable. That is where mental armor becomes impenetrable. Step forward. Build the system. Strengthen the mind. Claim control. Repeat deliberately. Chapter 4. Silence the noise around you. Noise is constant. It is external. It is internal. It comes from every direction. Conversations, notifications, alerts, thoughts, worries, opinions. Most people accept it. Most people surrender to it. That is a mistake. Noise reduces focus. Noise triggers reaction. Noise erodes clarity. You have a choice. That's the key. You can silence the noise. You can control your environment. You can control your mind. The first step is intentional silence. Create spaces where nothing demands your attention. Schedule time to be alone with your thoughts. No devices. No distractions. No obligations. Start small. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Gradually extend. Silence is not empty. Silence is active. Silence is deliberate. In silence, the mind organizes. In silence, the mind regulates. In silence, clarity grows. No noise, no panic. Clarity grows in silence. Repeat this. Internalize this. Live it. Noise is not only external, it is internal. Thoughts race, fears amplify, memories trigger anxiety, plans spiral out of control. The internal mind can be louder than the outside world. Silence your thoughts with structure. Observe them without judgment. Label them. Release them. Pause before responding. Intervene deliberately. Train the mind to notice but not react immediately. That is discipline. That is mental control. That is armor. No noise, no panic. Clarity grows in silence. You have a choice. That's the key. External distractions are equally destructive. Phones, notifications, emails, social media, news cycles, alerts ping at random. They hijack attention. They demand reactions. Each interruption creates a micro-stress event. Each micro-stress event compounds into chaos. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. Control the environment. Silence the triggers. Reduce interruptions. Limit access. Create rules. Make it automatic. No noise, no panic. Clarity grows in silence. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Digital detox is not optional. Decide what matters. Limit reactive triggers. Disable notifications. Mute social media. Schedule specific windows for emails. Close unnecessary apps. Commit to time blocks of uninterrupted focus. Treat distraction like a contaminant. Remove it from your environment. Protect your attention as if your life depends on it. It does. You have a choice. That's the key. Intentional silence and digital detox reinforce each other. Together, they create mental space. Space allows reflection. Space allows strategic thought. Space allows control. Without space, the mind remains reactive. Without space, panic emerges from micro-distractions. Without space, clarity is impossible. No noise, no panic. Clarity grows in silence. Internalize this. Repeat it. Apply it daily. That is the system. That is the structure. That is discipline. High performers understand this. Soldiers in combat zones withdraw to quiet moments to center themselves. Surgeons pause before procedures to eliminate distraction. CEOs close their doors to focus on decision-making. They control input. They control attention. They protect the mind from unnecessary noise. They do not wait for chaos to teach them. They prevent it. You can adopt the same principles. You do not need permission. You have a choice. That's the key. This is not a suggestion. Silence is a rule. Noise is a threat. Treat it as such. Protect your mind like a fortress. Build walls around focus. Reinforce them daily. Pause deliberately. Observe distractions. Remove or limit triggers. Practice intentional silence. Practice digital discipline. The structure is simple. Observe. Pause. Reduce. Repeat. No noise. No panic. Clarity grows in silence. That is law. That is system. That is habit. Repetition is essential. You will fail at first. Notifications will tempt you. Thoughts will intrude. Colleagues will interrupt. Your environment will challenge you. That is expected. That is feedback. Return to the system. Apply rules. Pause. Limit. Observe. Repeat. Strengthen mental barriers daily. Micro habits compound into macro control. Noise will no longer dictate your focus. Panic will no longer dictate your response. No noise, no panic. Clarity grows in silence. You have a choice. That's the key. The next step is to control internal dialogue. Awareness of noise is necessary, but insufficient. You must train how thoughts interact with distractions. You must build resilience not only against external stimuli, but against internal amplification. The next chapter will teach you how to identify and regulate your inner dialogue. You will learn how to replace reactive thought patterns with deliberate strategic responses. Awareness is structural. Silence is foundational. Inner control is next. Step forward. Protect the mind. Build armor. Claim clarity. Repeat deliberately. Chapter 5. Control your inner dialogue. Stress often begins inside. It begins in thought before it appears in action. Panic is not always triggered by events. Panic is triggered by interpretation. That is the truth. Your mind is the battlefield. Your thoughts are the terrain. If you surrender internally, you will surrender externally. You have a choice. That's the key. You can take control of your inner dialogue, or you can remain at its mercy. The first step is identification. Observe your thoughts. Label them. Do not argue with them. Do not suppress them. Notice when fear, doubt, or criticism arises. These are signals. Panic often begins as negative self-talk. It whispers, "You cannot handle this. This is too much. Why me?" Recognize it. Label it. Awareness interrupts automatic escalation. That is the rule. That is the system. That is discipline. You have a choice. That's the key. Negative self-talk is contagious internally. It spreads rapidly. It amplifies stress. It hijacks focus. It erodes clarity. Most people react without noticing. Most people let the inner critic dictate action. That is surrender. That is chaos. You cannot remain calm while accepting internal disorder. You do not change your life. You change what you repeat. Label thoughts. Observe them. Correct them. Repeat. 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 The next step is replacement. Fear is not eliminated. Fear is acknowledged and redirected. Replace "why is this happening" with "what can I do now?" Transform passive worry into active strategy. This is deliberate. This is structural. This is a system. Action displaces panic. Action restores control. Action reinforces resilience. You have a choice. That's the key. Repeat the question. Repeat the behavior. Repeat the habit until it is automatic. That is how mastery is built. Training your inner dialogue is not optional. It is structural. It is habitual. Elite performers practice it daily. Emergency responders rehearse mental scripts before entering high-stress situations. Athletes visualize challenges and frame them as actionable problems. CEOs anticipate crises and reframe obstacles as opportunities for decisive action. They do not wait for calm to arrive naturally. They build calm deliberately. You can adopt the same methods. You don't need permission. You have a choice. That's the key. Rules for inner dialogue are simple but firm. Rule 1. Label negative thoughts immediately. Identify the message. Identify the source. Observe without judgment. Awareness is the trigger for control. Without it, panic escalates. Rule 2. Redirect toward action. Ask, "what can I do now?" Focus on steps, not feelings. Focus on function, not fear. Thoughts become tools for performance rather than weapons of chaos. Rule 3. Repeat deliberately. Daily practice is required. Micro scripts, rehearsed responses, intentional mental adjustments. Repetition solidifies the habit. Repetition builds resilience. Repetition transforms panic into clarity. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. That is the principle. That is the system. That is the law. Internal dialogue is not passive. It interacts with every stressor. Left unchecked, it amplifies disruption. Left unchecked, it triggers reaction before strategy. Left unchecked, it corrodes mental armor. Train it consistently. Build scripts for common triggers. Pause before internalizing negative messages. Reframe immediately. Repeat daily. Repeat under low pressure. Repeat under high pressure. Discipline is internal. Control is structural. You have a choice. That's the key. failure will occur. You will hear old patterns resurface. You will catch yourself asking, "Why me?" or imagining worst-case outcomes. That is feedback. That is data. Observe it. Pause. Redirect. Reapply the rule. Reinforce structure. Mental control grows through iterative practice. Panic is temporary. Structure is permanent. Discipline is cumulative. No one else can enforce it. You don't need permission. You have a choice. That's the key. Consider the practical exercises. During downtime, visualize a recent challenge. Identify the internal dialogue that arose. Label it. Redirect it. Ask, "What can I do now?" Imagine strategic responses. Repeat this exercise for 5 minutes daily. Increase complexity gradually. Over time, the default response becomes strategic action. Panic is displaced. Clarity dominates. You have a choice. That's the key. Remember, it is not about eliminating fear. That is a flaw in thinking. Fear is natural. Fear is biology. It will appear. You cannot suppress it. You must manage it. You must control its influence. Replace passivity with action. Replace chaos with structure. Replace panic with clarity. Repeat the exercises. Repeat daily. Repeat relentlessly. That is mental armor. That is resilience. That is control. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. By the end of this chapter, you will recognize that internal dialogue is a lever, not a limit. You can use it to destabilize yourself, or you can use it to stabilize yourself. You can let panic dictate action, or you can let structure dictate action. Awareness, labeling, redirection, and repetition form the system. That is your mental toolkit. That is your armor. That is your discipline. No one else grants it. You don't need permission. You have a choice. That's the key. Prepare for the next chapter. You will learn to master the pause. You will learn how deliberate, micro pauses interrupt stress before it escalates. You will learn how brief interventions compound into structural calm. Awareness and dialogue control are necessary. The next step is action timing. Step forward. Build the system. Strengthen the mind. Control your responses. Claim clarity. Repeat deliberately. Chapter 6. Master the pause. Most people act without thinking. They respond instantly. They react. That is the default. Reaction is automatic. Reaction is unconscious. Reaction is chaos. You have a choice. That's the key. You do not have to act immediately. You do not have to surrender to stress. You can pause. You can interrupt the pattern. You can regain control. Pause is a system. Pause is a tool. Pause is armor. The power of micro-pauses is underestimated. Even 2 deep breaths can reset the body. Even 2 seconds of deliberate attention can reset the mind. Pause interrupts the automatic stress cascade. Pause creates space between stimulus and response. Space allows clarity. Space allows choice. Space converts panic into action. Pause is deliberate. Pause is structural. Pause is repeated. Pause. Think. Act. Come is control. Micro pauses must be practiced. Do not wait for emergencies. Do not wait for crises. Start small. During low-stress situations, pause before speaking. Pause before reacting to a minor inconvenience. Pause before responding to email. Pause before making decisions, even minor ones. These repetitions train the mind to default to control. Repetition beats intensity every time. That is the rule. That is the law. That is the system. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. The next step is deliberate practice under pressure. Simulate high-stress situations. Rehearse interruptions. Rehearse challenges. Create exercises to trigger reactions and then pause intentionally. Time yourself. Evaluate your response. Adjust. Repeat. The purpose is to condition the mind to remain deliberate when real stress occurs. Stress is inevitable. Panic is optional. Discipline is the differentiator. You have a choice. That's the key. Micro pauses affect physiology as well as psychology. Heart rate slows. Breathing stabilizes. Muscles relax. Tension decreases. The chemical stress response is moderated. Cognitive clarity increases. Decisions improve. Focus is restored. The pause is not passive. It is active. It is deliberate. It is structural. Pause reinforces calm. Pause reinforces control. Pause reinforces clarity. Pause. Think. Act. Calm is control. Implement rules for the pause. Rule 1. Recognize triggers. Identify events that provoke automatic reactions. Anticipate them. Prepare for them. Awareness triggers intervention. Without it, pause cannot be applied. Rule 2. Insert micro pauses consistently. 2 breaths. 3 breaths. 1 to 3 seconds of observation. Apply the pause before speech, movement, or decision. Repeat daily. Repeat in minor stress. Repeat in major stress. Repetition builds automaticity. Rule 3. Review and refine. After each practice, evaluate effectiveness. Identify where panic slipped through. Adjust the pause. Increase duration if needed. Repeat deliberately. Micro adjustments compound over time. That is mastery. That is structure. That is discipline. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. High performers utilize micro pauses consistently. Soldiers count breaths before engaging. Surgeons pause before incision. Athletes inhale deliberately before execution. Executives pause before decisions under pressure. They do not rely on instinct alone. They do not rely on emotion. They rely on structured, repeated intervention. You can adopt the same principles. You don't need permission. You have a choice. That's the key. Failure is expected. Micro pauses will be skipped at first. Mind will rush. Heart will accelerate. That is feedback. Observe it. Pause. Apply structure. Repeat. Reinforce. Micro pauses compound into macro control. Chaos is interrupted. Clarity dominates. Calm becomes habitual. Discipline becomes identity. Pause. Think. Act. Calm is control. The pause is scalable. Use it in simple tasks. Use it in complex decisions. Use it in conversation. Use it in crises. Each application strengthens neural pathways. Each repetition reinforces control. Each deliberate action builds mental armor. Pause is not optional. Pause is structural. Pause is required. You have a choice. That's the key. By the end of this chapter, you will recognize the pause as a lever. You will understand that even brief micro-interventions interrupt stress patterns. You will internalize that repeated practice under simulated or real pressure transforms automatic reactions into deliberate responses. Pause is the bridge between awareness and action. Pause converts chaos into strategy. Pause converts panic into control. Pause. Think. Act. Calm is control. Prepare for the next chapter. You will learn to systemize your calm. You will build routines that enforce mental control automatically. Awareness, inner dialogue, and pauses are foundational. The next step is structural reinforcement. Habits that ensure calm becomes the default state. Step forward. Practice deliberately. Repeat intentionally. Build the system. Claim control. Master the pause. Chapter 7. Systemize your calm. Calm cannot depend on willpower alone. Willpower is limited. Willpower is inconsistent. Willpower fails under prolonged pressure. That is why structure is required. Calm must be systemized. Calm must be habitual. Calm must be automatic. You have a choice. That's the key. You can wait for stress to strike and hope for discipline, where you can build systems that enforce calm regardless of circumstance. The first step is habit formation. Every reaction to stress should be guided by pre-established routines. You do not react randomly. You do not rely on emotion. You respond according to a system. The system removes uncertainty. The system removes chaos. Repeated, small habits become automatic. Automatic responses neutralize stress before it escalates. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. That is the principle. That is the law. That is the system. Morning preparation is the foundation. Begin the day deliberately. Review priorities. Establish intentions. Perform micro-routines that condition your mind for calm. Breathing exercises. Mindfulness check-ins. Journaling reflections. Visualize the day strategically. Each action reinforces focus. Each repetition builds resilience. By the time external stress appears, your system is active. Your mind is armored. You have a choice. That's the key. Midday resets maintain equilibrium. Most stress accumulates unnoticed throughout the day. Micro pauses interrupt escalation. Intentional silence restores clarity. Strategic breaks reinforce mental control. Review progress against objectives. Identify micro-triggers of stress. Reset focus through structured exercises. These resets prevent minor stress from compounding into chaos. Discipline is cumulative. Repetition is the engine. You don't need permission. You have a choice. Evening reflection consolidates the system. Review reactions to challenges. Evaluate success in maintaining calm. Identify gaps in habit application. Adjust routines as necessary. Document lessons. Reinforce successes. Plan interventions for the following day. Reflection is structural. Reflection is necessary. Reflection ensures that calm is habitual, not situational. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. That is the principle. That is the system. That is discipline. High-performing individuals exemplify this principle. Entrepreneurs begin each day with structured routines. Athletes rehearse visualization drills before practice. Military personnel perform ritualized mental checks. They do not rely on luck. They do not react impulsively. Their calm is pre-programmed into daily systems. Their performance under stress is predictable. Their responses are deliberate. You can adopt the same approach. You don't need permission. You have a choice. That's the key. The system works in layers. Awareness and pause establish control. Inner dialogue refines focus. Micro pauses maintain intervention. Daily routines make calm automatic. Each layer reinforces the other. Each layer strengthens resilience. Chaos is neutralized before it escalates. Panic is intercepted before it dictates behavior. You do not rely on chance or emotion. You rely on repeated systems. You have a choice. That's the key. Rules for systemizing calm are straightforward. Rule 1. Build routines around key stress points. Morning, midday, and evening. Each routine enforces calm. Each routine repeats deliberate practice. Rule 2. Automate responses through repetition. Small, daily interventions become instinctive. Repetition beats intensity. Repetition builds armor. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. Rule 3. Reflect and adjust consistently. Identify gaps. Correct patterns. Optimize the system. Habitual calm requires iterative improvement. The system must be robust. Failures will occur. External pressures will disrupt routines. Unexpected challenges will arise. That is normal. That is feedback. Observe. Adjust. Reinforce. Repeat. Discipline compounds. Habits solidify. Calm becomes automatic. You don't need permission. You have a choice. That's the key. Understand this. Calm is a default state when it is systemized. Without systems, calm is temporary. Without systems, stress dictates responses. Without systems, panic becomes automatic. Systems transform effort into instinct. Systems transform repetition into armor. Systems transform daily discipline into lifelong resilience. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. That is the law. That is the structure. That is the system. By the end of this chapter, you will recognize that calm is not a reaction. Calm is not conditional. Calm is structural. It is built through repeated, layered systems. Awareness, pause, inner dialogue, and micro-practices form the foundation. Daily routines consolidate the system. Habit replaces willpower. Discipline becomes automatic. You have a choice. That's the key. You don't need permission. Step forward. Build the system. Repeat deliberately. Claim calm. Reinforce clarity. Prepare for the next chapter. You will learn to focus only on what you can control. You will learn to separate influence from concern. You will learn to redirect mental energy toward action instead of worry. Systems maintain calm. Focus maximizes effectiveness. The next step is mastering control over priorities. Step forward. Practice deliberately. Build structure. Claim control. Repeat intentionally. Chapter 8. Focus on what you can control. Most people waste energy on what they cannot change. They worry. They ruminate. They react to outcomes they do not influence. That is chaos. That is wasted effort. That is panic disguised as action. You have a choice. That's the key. You can redirect mental energy toward control, or you can surrender it to external forces. Focus is structural. Focus is deliberate. Focus is a habit. The first principle is separation. Identify what is within your influence and what is outside it. Influence is where action changes outcomes. Concern is where observation has no effect. Most people conflate the two. Most people exhaust themselves on concern. Stop. Pause. Categorize. Separate. Label every thought, every task, every worry as controllable or uncontrollable. Awareness is the trigger. Without it, chaos dominates. With it, control is possible. You have a choice. That's the key. Next, systematize your focus. Identify 3 controllable actions per day. No more, no less. Keep it specific. Keep it measurable. Execute these actions relentlessly. Each completed task reinforces structure. Each repetition reinforces discipline. Each success compounds confidence. Micro steps become habits. Habits become systems. Systems enforce calm. Control the controllable, release the rest. Repeat daily. Repeat deliberately. Repeat relentlessly. The system works because it prevents mental diffusion. Focus is not multitasking. Focus is precision. Focus is concentration on action that produces tangible results. External variables may shift. Circumstances may change. That is expected. That is external. Ignore it. Direct energy only to what you can influence. That is the difference between reaction and response. That is the difference between panic and control. Control the controllable, release the rest. You have a choice. That's the key. Implement rules for daily practice. Rule 1. Identify 3 controllable actions each morning. Write them down. Confirm their feasibility. Confirm their impact. These are your anchors for the day. Rule 2. Execute with discipline. Begin with the first action. Complete it fully. Move to the second. Complete it fully. Finish the third. No shortcuts. No rationalizations. Micro-completion compounds into macro control. Rule 3. Release the uncontrollable. External outcomes, opinions, environmental chaos. Accept they exist. Do not fight them. Do not waste energy. Observation is sufficient. Action is optional. Focus is structural. Control the controllable. Release the rest. Repeat, repeat, repeat. High-performing individuals apply this principle daily. CEOs prioritize tasks that directly influence outcomes. Surgeons focus on procedure, not patient reactions. Athletes control execution, not opponent performance. They enforce structure. They enforce discipline. They separate influence from concern. You can adopt the same approach. You don't need permission. You have a choice. That's the key. Repetition is essential. Each day, identify your 3 actions. Execute deliberately. Release everything else. Observe results. Adjust the next day. Reinforce the system. Over time, mental energy shifts from reaction to strategy. Panic diminishes. Clarity dominates. Calm becomes default. Micro-actions compound into structural control. Control the controllable. Release the rest. Repeat deliberately. Internalize. Practice consistently. That is the system. That is discipline. That is mastery. Understand this. Effort is finite. Energy is limited. Mental bandwidth is precious. Wasting it on uncontrollable elements reduces effectiveness. Focusing on control amplifies results. Structure your day around influence. Structure your habits around actionable tasks. Train daily. Repeat deliberately. Repeat intentionally. Repeat relentlessly. Control the controllable. Release the rest. That is law. That is system. That is habit. By the end of this chapter, you will recognize that calm is not just about handling stress. It is about directing energy toward action that matters. Chaos is neutralized by disciplined focus. Panic is prevented by repeated application of systems. Awareness, inner dialogue, pauses, and daily routines form the foundation. Control the controllable, release the rest. You have a choice. That's the key. You don't need permission. Step forward. Build the system. Apply focus. Execute deliberately. Claim clarity. Prepare for the next chapter. You will learn how to turn pressure into performance. You will learn to convert adrenaline into action. You will learn to leverage stress as a tool rather than a threat. Focus is structural. Calm is habitual. Performance is the outcome. Step forward. Practice deliberately. Build control. Execute strategically. Repeat relentlessly. Chapter 9. Turn pressure into performance. Pressure is inevitable. Stress is unavoidable. Panic is optional. Most people perceive pressure as a threat. That is a flaw in thinking. Stress is not an enemy. Stress is a signal. It is data. It is actionable energy. You have a choice. That's the key. You can allow pressure to destabilize you, or you can convert it into performance. That is the difference between reaction and mastery. The first step is reframing. Every stress response is a message from your body and mind. Increased heart rate, tension, heightened awareness. These are not warnings of failure. They are indicators of readiness. They are cues to act strategically. Observe the signal. Label it. Interpret it deliberately. Do not surrender to instinct alone. Do not allow fear to dictate action. Reframe stress as energy waiting to be directed. You have a choice. That's the key. Next, channel tension into focus. Adrenaline can fragment the mind or sharpen it. You determine the outcome. Direct attention to actionable tasks. Break complex problems into controllable steps. Utilize micro pauses to regulate physiology. Control breathing. Align thoughts with deliberate action. Micro-interventions convert pressure into clarity. Micro-actions convert panic into control. Repetition reinforces this pathway. Repeat daily. Repeat under stress. Repeat until automatic. Focus becomes performance. Pressure becomes productivity. High-performing individuals illustrate this principle. Athletes convert nervous energy into precision execution. Public speakers transform pre-stage anxiety into measured, persuasive delivery. Crisis managers direct adrenaline into problem-solving under extreme conditions. They do not resist the signal. They do not succumb to panic. They harness it. They practice deliberately. They repeat consistently. You can adopt the same method. You don't need permission. You have a choice. That's the key. Implement structural rules. Rule 1. Reframe stress as a signal. Label it. Accept it. Convert it into a cue for strategic action. Stress is not an obstacle. It is information. Rule 2. Break pressure into actionable components. Identify controllable elements. Execute deliberately. Focus attention on the parts you can influence. Ignore the rest. Control the controllable. Release the rest. Rule 3. Practice under simulated pressure. Rehearse high-stress scenarios deliberately. Visualize challenges. Execute responses. Review outcomes. Adjust and repeat. Repetition builds resilience. Repetition builds mastery. The system is physiological and psychological. Adrenaline prepares the body to act. The mind can be directed to guide action efficiently. Micro-pauses, deliberate focus, and predefined routines transform stress into execution. Without structure, energy dissipates into panic. With structure, energy drives performance. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. That is the principle. That is the system. That is discipline. Daily repetition strengthens the pathway. Use small stressors as drills. Traffic delays. Difficult conversations. Minor emergencies. Observe physiological responses. Apply controlled attention. Execute strategically. Convert tension into action. Internalize the habit. Scale to higher pressure situations. Discipline compounds. Performance becomes default. Pressure becomes opportunity. You have a choice. That's the key. Understand this. It is not about eliminating stress. That is impossible. Stress is constant. Stress is inevitable. It is about mastery over response. It is about converting raw energy into productive execution. It is about discipline under pressure. Calm is structural. Action is deliberate. Repetition reinforces skill. Focus becomes automatic. Panic becomes optional. You have a choice. That's the key. By the end of this chapter, you will recognize that pressure is not a threat. It is a tool. You will understand that micro-pauses, deliberate focus, and structured action convert stress into performance. You will internalize the system. Awareness, mental dialogue, pause, and habit reinforce each other. Pressure becomes manageable. Panic is neutralized. Energy is directed. Discipline becomes automatic. Focus becomes performance. Pressure becomes productivity. You have a choice. That's the key. You don't need permission. Step forward. Practice deliberately. Apply structure. Convert tension into execution. Repeat relentlessly. Prepare for the final chapter. You will learn to live calm and lead calm. You will integrate all the systems learned so far into daily life. Awareness, inner dialogue, micro-pauses, routines, focus, and structured responses converge into permanent mental armor. Calm will become your default. Your influence will extend to others. Step forward. Build the system. Claim clarity. Execute deliberately. Repeat consistently. Chapter 10. Live calm, led calm. Calm is not a trait. Calm is not luck. Calm is a habit. Calm is a choice. Calm is your power. Most people wait for circumstances to grant them composure. That is a mistake. Calm is built. Calm is reinforced. Calm is practiced daily. You have a choice. That's the key. You can make calm your default, or you can remain reactive. The decision is structural. The decision is deliberate. The decision is yours. Consistency breeds mastery. Daily habits solidify calm into identity. Awareness, micro-pauses, inner dialogue, routines, and focus are not temporary measures. They're systems. They are repeated until they become automatic. They are reinforced until control is instinct. Perform the practices every day without exception. Execute the drills with precision. Reinforce the habits deliberately. Repetition beats intensity every time. You don't change your life. You change what you repeat. That is the law. That is the system. That is discipline. Calm extends beyond self-control. Calm influences others. Your composure is observed. Your focus is mirrored. Your response is copied. Those around you react to your energy, not your words. Leaders, parents, colleagues, and teams all mirror calm or chaos. If you are reactive, they follow. If you are composed, they follow. Influence is structural. Influence is habitual. Calm becomes leadership. Calm becomes authority. You have a choice. That's the key. Systemize calm across daily life. Begin each day with structured habits, breathing exercises, reflection, and intention setting. Maintain focus through micro-pauses and prioritized actions. Reframe internal dialogue. Practice under simulated or minor stressors. End each day with evaluation and adjustment. These systems reinforce identity. These systems solidify control. These systems transform stress into opportunity. Discipline becomes automatic. Calm becomes default. Repeat deliberately. Repeat consistently. Repeat relentlessly. High-performing individuals embody this principle. Executives maintain composure under crisis, guiding teams strategically. Surgeons lead operating rooms without panic, influencing every member's focus. Elite athletes manage adrenaline and pressure, directing performance for maximum results. These examples are not coincidental. They are systems applied consistently. They are habits executed relentlessly. They are discipline incarnate. You can adopt the same practices. You don't need permission. You have a choice. That's the key. Rules for living and leading calm. Rule 1. Practice consistently. Reinforce habits daily. Small actions compound into automatic control. Calm becomes identity. Rule 2. Influence by example. Your composure structures the environment. Others mirror your energy. Calm spreads through repeated action. Rule 3. Integrate all systems. Awareness, inner dialogue, micro-pauses, routines, focus, and response management converge into permanent mental armor. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Discipline is structural. Calm is habitual. Control is automatic. Failure will occur. Circumstances will challenge you. Others will resist calm. That is expected. That is feedback. Observe. Reapply structure. Reinforce habits. Adjust deliberately. Micro-discipline accumulates. Panic diminishes. Clarity dominates. Calm becomes identity. Calm becomes default. Calm becomes power. You have a choice. That's the key. By the end of this chapter, you will understand that calm is not a goal. It is a lifestyle. Calm is not temporary. It is structural. Calm is not reactive. It is deliberate. Daily habits transform stress management into identity. Micro-pauses, inner dialogue, routines, and focus converge into automatic control. Calm spreads outward, influencing others and shaping outcomes. Discipline compounds into mastery. You have a choice. You don't need permission. Step forward. Execute deliberately. Reinforce systems. Claim composure. Lead with calm. Repeat consistently. Calm is a habit. Calm is a choice. Calm is your power. This is the culmination of every principle in this audiobook. Awareness. Pause. Inner dialogue. Habit. Focus. Action. Structure. Practice. Repetition. Influence. Identity. Calm is your system. Calm is your armor. Calm is your power. You have a choice. That's the key. Repeat deliberately. Repeat consistently. Repeat relentlessly. Calm is a habit. Calm is a choice. Calm is your power.